Okay, it's 9 o'clock. I think we'll press on because we will plan to keep to time, and we are intending to be finished by 9:30. I'll cover a quick introduction and housekeeping, and I've got my 4 colleagues from Syngenta here. Jen, who's going to do a season review, Matt Bull, who is going to cover winter wheat, Tracy Creasy, who's going to look at malting barley, and Paul Roach, who's going to look at hybrid barley. So just a bit of housekeeping to start with. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask any questions through this session, please use the Q&A button. That will then come to me, and I'll be able to collate those as we go. 2 basis points are available, and you'll get those. We'll send you an email out after the event, which will include a recording. So obviously this is being recorded, so obviously you'll need to be aware of that. And we'll send you out a copy of the slides and the feedback, basis details and the feedback form at the end. And the rest is now just to sit back, relax and enjoy, and please ask any questions as we go through the presentations. So, without any ado, Jen, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Jen Kingsmill. I'm an area manager in North Cambridgeshire and South Lincolnshire. And I feel like I've drawn the short straw today because my job is to summarise the season that you're all trying very hard to forget. But if we just start by having a look at some weather data, we'll recap the season, and ultimately I think the lesson for us is that it's been a very challenging year, but hopefully we will have learnt some valuable lessons about our varieties and how resilient they can be in different conditions. So you can see from this map on the left here that this was our winter season compared with the previous 30 years, and you can see from the dark blue blotches that the rainfall was well above average this winter, which led to delayed drilling across the country, and our local trial sites, Stamford and Rougham, were much the same. You then fast forward into the spring, and it's the complete opposite. You can see from the brown on the chart there on the right that we had a very, very dry spring, well below average. And with the huge demand that we had for spring barley and spring wheat this year, it dried up as soon as we started on with those, really. And this may have impacted some of your decisions with PGRs and fungicides. And then if we think about the temperature throughout the year, you can see from the pink and the red on the charts for both winter and spring, you can see that we were much warmer than average throughout the season as well, so consistently mild. And this impacted the disease patterns that you will all be familiar with. These photos are taken from our trial site over at Stamford, and you can see the Dunstan on the left, high yellow rust pressure all year, and you guys will all be familiar with that. We've had a very high yellow rust pressure year. Brown rust has started to creep in towards the very end of the season, but really, if we think about septoria, things have been pretty clean all year, and the septoria pressure has been quite low. If we consider barleys, barleys have been pretty clean all year as well. The disease pressure tended to dry up in the spring, as with the weather. But really, I think time will tell as combines start to roll over the next few days. As we get started, we'll start to see how some of these varieties have coped with the challenging season that we've had, and perhaps how some of our farmers have coped as well. So I'll hand back to the rest of the speakers to talk you through varieties in a bit more depth.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I'm hopefully now going to get to the next slide. I will, lovely. Right, and now I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to cover hybrid barley. Paul, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. So let me introduce myself, Paul Roach, Seeds Technical Manager for Syngenta. And first, just for some context, when we look at what growers need, the top 6 things to be successful with hybrid barley, then autumn establishment is absolutely critical to that. And variety choice and seed rate are key elements of that success story. So if we look at the varieties themselves, you're all familiar with the recommended list, and the hybrids still continue to lead the way for yield on that recommended list. And yield and grain quality, of course, are key elements of this, and just want to show you this, how over the years maybe some of the hybrids have had a bad rap for grain quality. But this is showing you specific weight and how it's improved over the last kind of 15 years or so. You see the blue line, which is there for the hybrids, that's all the varieties on the recommended list. And you see they're now at an equivalent level to the two-row varieties. And if you look at the trend lines there, the dotted lines, you'll see that over that same period, maybe the grain quality of the two rows has declined in that same period. And several people have been talking to us about the positioning for the crop and how's it fit in versus second wheat. So just thought, sure, let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. The budget figures for yield and grain are going to be very farm specific. But if you look at the other kind of contextual things, here we've got things like the grass weeds, eliminating some of the sprays. But talking to some people recently, saying cash flow could be an issue from spring next year, and maybe the earlier harvest will give some earlier cash flow and also spread the workload at harvest as well. And this is my kind of short list of 3 varieties if you're in the east, and I'll just give you a quick wander through as we progress. So starting with Kingsbarn, this is the flagship variety, #1 hybrid barley variety in the ground this year. And this one's all about kind of consistently high yield, best in the east, phenomenal grain quality, and good round agronomics, which make it kind of easy to grow. And just to kind of put that into context, if we look at the yield and the specific weight and the arrows taking you to a place with more yield and higher grain quality, and you can see there that Kingsbarn is occupying a place all of its own, and it's uniquely well placed for yield and specific weight. So that's why it's popular and a good choice for this region. Another on my shortlist is Belmont. So still the #1 for yield. Done a consistent job all years, all soil types and all regions, but here in the east doing well, and gives you that kind of grass weed suppression in there as well. And just to kind of illustrate this consistency of performance, look at the yield for the last 5 years. You see it's pretty solid performance all across the board in each of those years, giving 10 tons plus in every season, even as high as over 11 in one. So good, strong, reliable and dependable performance with this variety. And my final one on the list is Bazooka. Many people are going to be familiar with this variety, been popular for a number of years now, based on its proven on-farm performance, grass weed suppression. It's earned its place for being tried and trusted. And part of that kind of proven on-farm performance is about environmental stability. And we've used some statistics here called the stability index to look at stability. Low value is more stable. So if you look, the arrow takes you to a place that's more stable and has more yield. So you see Bazooka very well placed for both characters, and it's giving you that kind of reliable and dependable performance. But of course, Bazooka is going to be many people's introduction to the whole grassweed suppression phenomenon, and the work that we've been doing on blackgrass is kind of widely publicised and coming to life on many farms across the east here. But in the last few seasons, we've also extended the work into kind of brome and ryegrass. And the reason why this is kind of even more important for people who've got these problems is that they are even more competitive than blackgrass. Blackgrass is bad enough, but these are even worse. Same level of competition as cleavers and the like. And looking ahead to this kind of season, just seeing the results here, that it works in a very similar way to blackgrass, that winter wheat is less competitive than conventional barley, both 2-row and 6-row, which are less competitive than hybrid barley. And we get the same picture with ryegrass too. And just something food for thought for this coming season. Some people be thinking of drilling early, but we can see from the chart here to achieve high levels of control with blackgrass, you need to combine a whole range of measures. And we've got the box delayed drilling. If we remove that element and that's compromised, then we're doing even more heavy lifting with the competitive varieties and the seed rates. And if you're interested in any more information on blackgrass, brome, ryegrass suppression, all covered in more detail in the roach approach videos. And if you're interested in combine setup, then there's some information there too. Some of the first results in Farmers Weekly are suggesting that the results for barley are maybe a bit better than people expected. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to Mark.
Lovely, thank you, Paul. Okay, and we'll now move on to winter wheat for the east. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Mark, and good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. I just want to spend the next 5 minutes or so running through the Syngenta winter wheat varieties for this autumn, and hopefully call out a few of the features which might help address some of the challenges that we have on farm. So Group 4 continues to be the largest NABIM grouping across the UK, with 42% of the winter wheat area, 34% of which is hard, and that's currently exactly where the Syngenta winter wheat varieties fit. So hopefully there's a large proportion of you on the call today looking to supplement your farm businesses with high yielding hard Group 4s. So Syngenta are fortunate enough to have 4 excellent recommended list varieties in SY Inciter, Gleam, Graham and Chabras, each of which have unique growth habits and agronomic profiles, which means they can be effectively positioned on farm to ensure that growers get the maximum performance from them. So in the interest of time, let's dive into the varieties, and hopefully I can give you some insights as to which varieties will be best suited for your farms. So the first variety to introduce you to is newly recommended SY Inciter. We at Syngenta are massively enthused by the launch of Inciter on farm for this autumn. It comes on as the new high yielding barn filler with outstanding grain quality. So arguably the most attractive trait for a hard Group 4 winter wheat variety is yield, and SY Inciter certainly doesn't let us down there. So as you can see from the chart on the left, it joins the recommended list as the highest yielding hard Group 4 in the east, bringing a decent yield advantage over all of the existing commercial options. But we know variety choice is now much more than just yield. And SY Inciter has a host of other agronomic benefits to help address some of the challenges on farm. It also brings a step change in grain quality over the existing commercial options, most notably for its fantastic specific weight. So experience has shown that varieties with inherently high specific weight tend to perform relatively well in more stressful scenarios, particularly where there's been droughty springs and nutrient and water uptake has been limited. So we're hoping to see an excellent performance from SY Inciter again this season. SY Inciter has also demonstrated excellent yield potential in both the first and second cereal position, and it has unrivaled late drilled yields on the official recommended list data. We know that Inciter is certainly a vigorous variety come spring, and it's also one of the earlier varieties to hit growth stage 30, which helps it produce a rooting system which will help it perform in suboptimal conditions. As with other Syngenta options, it's also a low risk from septoria perspective. So it's got a 6.6 rating for septoria, and it also has orange wheat blossom midge resistance, which may well be something that you're thinking about for this autumn. So if we dive into the next slide, please, Mark. So the next variety to touch on briefly is Gleam. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Gleam. Gleam is now the most popular hard Group 4 variety on farm, and that's driven by a number of different agronomic characteristics. It has a really well balanced profile in general, and one of the key things to pull out is its yield stability across different seasons and environments, which means it's become the dependable variety you can rely on farm. So as you can see from the chart on the left, Gleam has expressed great adaptability across different seasons. You can see in those charts we've had the beast from the east last spring, which was extremely dry, and hopefully we'll see a similar picture this season, which has been again another challenging year. But But we know that Gleam has an extremely high tillering capacity and an ability to retain those tillers throughout the season, which is allowing it to deliver in those suboptimal conditions. So the adaptable option, we know that Gleam is extremely adaptable. It's a fantastic first and second wheat option. It comes with that early maturity as well, which makes it an attractive option. And the final thing about adaptability is its drill date flexibility. So Gleam has an extremely wide drilling window, and 2019 certainly taught us the importance of drill date flexibility. Gleam we would recommend for drilling from the 1st of September, but it drills right through to the middle of February, which is later than any of the other Syngenta offerings. And then the final things just to pull out for Gleam is that I just wanted to touch on its low risk profile with excellent untreated yields. And that's largely driven by strong septoria resistance ratings, as well as stiff straw and orange wheat blossomage resistance, as well as inciter. Next slide, please, Mark. So Graham, hopefully you're all also aware of Graham. He's a big character on farm, and he's also already very popular. And for this season, I just wanted to pull out some of the benefits for Graham as an early drill option. So although we still fully advocate integrated management of weeds and pests for BYDV management, etc., there are still some scenarios where early drilling is appropriate. And if you're thinking of utilizing early drilling on your farms, then it's absolutely critical to make sure that you're selecting a suitable variety. And Gleam really fits the bill here. So if you're looking for an early drill variety, I think there's 3 key things to consider. Growth habit. So you want a variety which is slow to develop over winter, but then comes with early maturity. So Graham absolutely fits the bill there. Stiff straw. We know that early drill winter wheat crops are at greater risk of lodging. So having varieties with inherently stiff straw can help balance the risks there. And then additionally, you want a variety with good disease profile, particularly for the primary diseases of septoria and yellow rust, as the crops will be exposed to more disease cycles over winter, inevitably increasing the pressure. So you need to be selecting a variety with a good disease package as well. And we think Graham fits really well there as the secure option, which has proven on-farm performance in the early drilled slot. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So with the loss of important multi-site chemistry this year in the form of chlorothalonil and continued pressure on the rest of the crop protection armory, we're seeing a shift of preference to varieties with higher and more robust disease profiles across the country, and that's primarily driven by the Septoria triticale rating. A good Septoria rating reduces the risk in a high pressure year, but also means the variety will be slightly more forgiving in seasons where fungicide timings might be compromised because of weather or workload, and essentially it acts as an insurance policy. If we think about this season and the previous season, we've had extremely dry springs, and then we've had later epidemics where the Septoria triticale has come in, and that puts even more pressure on the variety resistance, with CP inputs often being cut back. So Syngenta absolutely committed to bringing varieties to the market which are 6 or above for Septoria triticale, and hopefully that is helping you manage the risks on farm whilst maintaining yield potential. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So just to briefly clarify exactly where we see our varieties fitting on your farms, we have SY Inciter, the highest yielding for hard group 4 in the east, and that's an excellent first and second wheat option with really impressive yields on the lighter lands. We then have Gleam, very good first or second wheat with an extremely wide drilling window. Chabras, I haven't actually touched much on today, but we know Chabras excels as a second wheat and also on lighter lands. And we know it's got excellent spring vigor. So if you're in a grass weed scenario, that additional crop competition from Chabras may be appealing to you guys. And then the final option over in the east is Graham. Excellent early drilled option, but we would certainly position that in a first wheat scenario. And that's that from me on the winter wheat. So back to you, Mark.
Lovely. Thank you, Matt, for that. Obviously, if you've got any questions over the previous 3 presentations, please put them in the Q&A. There's a couple that's come in already. And now I'll just hand over to Tracy, who's going to cover malting, barley and leach. Tracy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, So we're just going to have a quick look at winter and spring malts. So I don't have many slides on this, but just as a look at our current winter malting offerings. So for these, we've got three varieties really. Craft and Lettram are our mainstream varieties, but they go alongside Flagon, which is a very popular variety in East Anglia for Chris Maltons. And these three varieties together are the current mainstay of the winter malt market. So if you move on, please, Mark. And they go alongside our springs. So the spring malts for 2021 will be Laureate. There'll be some Peppino still, and there's increasing amounts of fairing in that East Anglia area as well. And they go alongside the two new varieties, which I'll talk about in more detail, Tungsten and Splendor. But if we move on and look at the malting barley approval list, we can see how the varieties in the UK sit in terms of maltster approval and maltster exception. And if we look at those winter brewing varieties, as I mentioned before, Flagon and Craft. Flagon's been in the market for a very long time now. Craft's been in the market for coming up to 4 years. And then the new variety is Electrum. So Electrum was recommended 2 years ago on the HDE recommended list, but it takes 2 years to get full approval for a winter malting barley. And so in June 2020, just over a month ago, Electrum received full approval after really successful pilot malts and is now fully approved for the winter malt section. So the three varieties there in the winter brew malt section are three from Syngenta. And they go alongside our big spring varieties. So Laureate for the brewing and the malt distilling market. Peppino, obviously, a mainstay for the brewing market. We see in fairing increasingly coming in for the southern market as well, for the grain distill high nitrogen varieties. And then Tungsten is P1. So provisionally approved. So it's recommended in December 2019. It's provisionally approved for both brewing and malt distilling, and Splendor as well, provisionally approved for brewing in the spring sector. So tremendous selection of varieties. And if we move forward a slide, we'll have a look at them in a little bit more detail. So Laureate, I won't talk too much about Laureate. Everyone knows it. It's still the highest yielding variety with full approval for both brewing and distilling. It's already been the mainstay of Scotland for a while now, but increasingly building in the UK, in England for that brewing market, but also giving the maltster the flexibility, because depending on what the spec comes in at, he can go for the distilling market, of which there's plenty of options, either in local maltsters or to transport. It's also a great variety for the export market, beginning to build on the continent now, so strong demand coming for Laureate. If we move to the next slide, I've just put a slide in here for fairing. So fairing is a variety that traditionally was bred for Scotland. It's the only fully approved grain distilled variety on the recommended list, but it's getting really good popularity further south, and is on contract with Chris Maltons. It's the earliest maturing variety available in the spring sector, and that's a real benefit. Paul talked earlier about spreading risk, spreading workload, etc. And that's what fairing can do as well. But it's also a variety that goes for high nitrogen, so a really good variety on the land that traditionally has grown wheat. And maybe you're not thinking you can get a spec for a malting spring barley, well, possibly fairing is a great option there. Also delivers big bulk grain, excellent Rinco resistance, and will deliver every time for that high nitrogen market. So if we move forward, Mark, please. Thank you. So just a quick look at the two varieties that will launch on farm this spring 2021. And they are Tungsten and Splendor. We're tremendously excited for this. If we move forward, we'll have a look at them in a little bit more detail. So this is the HDB recommended list, very colour-coded chart. We can see on the variety on the left, SY Splendor is the highest yielding variety on the HDB recommended list. It's purple because it's a brew-only variety, so it's a variety that's similar to Planet and going for that brew market, but delivers significantly higher yield than the current varieties in that sector. The next variety I want to look at is SY Tungsten. So it is the highest yielding potential brew and malt distill variety. So currently the highest yielding variety in that sector is Laureate. LG Diablo is currently fully approved for distilling but not brewing, and then Tungsten increases the yield even further. And if we move on, thank you. So if we just have a look at the three key points for Tungsten, it's the highest yielding variety of those dual purpose varieties. There's not many true dual purpose varieties in brewing and distilling there, and it's the highest yielding, plus it's 2% higher yielding than Planet, so bringing significant yield advantages in. It's a great variety in terms of its grain quality. It's got the highest hot water extract on the recommended list, which means it will be in strong demand from end users. Really good specific weight and low screening. So outstanding grain quality across the board. And it's got very similar quality performance in terms of its spirit yield to Concerto as well. So not only has it got the highest hot water extract, but it really brings that spirit yield into play as well. So this is a variety that will be in strong demand from the end users. If we move one more, we look at SY Splendor. So this is a variety that will be particularly good in the East. It's outstanding yield. It's the highest yielding variety on the recommended list. It's going for pilots for the brew market, and we hope it will get full approval in June 2021. And it's outstandingly consistent, even in incredibly different seasons. So really bringing a great consistency and a great confidence in how it's going to perform going forward. Also really good spec weight. It's one of the only varieties to come near Pepino, so 68.1. Good nitrogen hot water extract as well. So if you move forward, I think that's the end of my slides, and I will hand back to Mark as we look at new varieties. If you move it forward, that shouldn't build, Mark, that one, sorry. If you go forward one, another, thank you. Back to Mark, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions so far. We've got a couple of minutes left before 9:30 when we were closed. So one question that came in is to you, Paul. So pay attention. So which hybrid variety is best for grass weed control?
Okay, well, they're all quite similar in their different performances, and difficult to actually give a completely solid answer on that one. We have looked at it, but there's quite a lot of variability between the sites. But if you use the Mark 1 eyeball as a kind of guide, and also the kind of light loggers, then you probably say that SY Kingsbarn and Bazooka are probably the best.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one for either well, Tracy and Matt actually. So and it was, what new varieties do you have on the candidate list that you think are going to come forward at the end of the year?
I think we've got some really exciting varieties in terms of wheat. We have SY Clipper, and maybe I should let Matt just say something about that. And in terms of malting barley, we have probably the variety is SY Fable. We've got two varieties at the moment, but I think SY Fable is the variety likely to make it as a dual purpose, really high quality variety. But I'll let Matt talk about Clipper for a minute.
Yeah, so Clipper is RL candidate stage at the moment. It's shown incredibly high yields, particularly in last season. So we expect it to join the recommended list similar or slightly above the SY Insighter level. But again, it's bringing that yield, but with excellent disease resistance. So it will come on as above a 6 for septoria resistance, but it will be the best of the Syngenta portfolio in terms of rust, both brown and yellow rust. And then on top of that, it's also got really excellent straw strength. So we've seen very little lodging in Clipper, so we're excited about that. And then the final thing to mention is its growth habit. It's got a really interesting and different growth habit. It's one of the earliest varieties in trial to get going in spring, and it's got massive vigor. You can really see it out in the field. It's a waxless or semi-waxless variety, so it's very obvious when you do see it. And yeah, we're excited to see how it goes this year.
Lovely. Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much for the panelists who presented this morning. It's 9:30, so the close of our meeting. You'll, I say, receive a copy of the presentation that we've had, with also how to apply for your basis points. And also, if you would give us feedback on this meeting, it'd be greatly appreciated, so we can look at improving these sessions going forward. So thank you very much for attending, and I will let you have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.